Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. My name is Ian Hamilton. I'm in New York, and I'm joined today by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios. I'm wearing a Quest 3 headset with hand tracking and meta avatars, and I'm wearing the Tap XR wearable controller today, trying to learn how to tap out messages from the one-handed wearable keyboard input system there. The embargo has just lifted on the Mars Garden course for Walkabout Mini Golf that has an optional lower gravity mode and a lively biodome to explore. We've got a tour of that. And I guess I'll just mention right now, if you're in the open beta for Walkabout Mini Golf on iOS, I believe the Mars Garden course marks the beginning of cross-play testing. So they could obviously take that offline at any time, but they're actively testing that right now with the latest update arriving with Mars Garden. We'll have more about games on our Tuesday VR Gamescast. Right now, we're ready to talk about why VR is the foundation of personal computing in the 21st century. David, what do we have today?
We're going to have quite a long show today with 9 topics in total split into sections. We will firstly talk about the fact that a Varjo headset is being used to help train Ukrainian Air Force pilots to fly the F-16 fighter jets that the country has recently received. We will then have 3 major sections of the show. The first will be MetaQuest news, the second will be Apple news, and the third will be PlayStation 5 Pro and PSVR 2 news and what that new console means for PSVR 2. So in the MetaQuest section, we'll be talking about the Quest V69 update. We'll talk about images of Quest 3S leaking, even more images ahead of what we expect will be its launch at Meta Connect later this month. And we will discuss Meta's CTO's explanation for why the company won't be making its own equivalent to Pico motion trackers unless those do so well that they prove him wrong. In the Apple section, we'll talk about the iPhone 16, the regular model, getting the ability to capture spatial photos and videos and what that means for 3D media in general. We will talk about some new Apple immersive videos. So there's a new Elevated series that has a Hawaii first episode. And then there are Super Bowl highlights that Ian will talk about because I don't know anything about American football. And we'll finish the Apple section by talking about the report suggesting that Apple could eventually use regular OLED panels to release much cheaper vision headsets later in the decade. In that final section, the PlayStation section, we will talk about, firstly, a developer who got PlayStation VR 2's adaptive triggers working on PC, one of the missing features in the Sony Steam VR driver they've managed to get working. And then we'll talk about what PlayStation 5 Pro means for PlayStation VR 2 games. We'll give our general takes on PlayStation VR or PlayStation 5 Pro as a console.
So let's move through it as quickly as we can. I want to say thank you to our members and our patrons for supporting the work that we do on YouTube and on our website. It's incredible to see your support. Thank you so much. I'm seeing Sweden, Canada, Poland, Maine, the United Kingdom, Sacramento, a lot of other places tuning in with us today. Headset Historian, Quentin, and several other members here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. David, let's just get right into that first subject with Varjo. I think I make the case pretty strongly on the show. It's now in our intro, and we can debate it on an ongoing basis, whether or not it's true. But it's my sort of assertion at the beginning of the show that VR is the foundation of personal computing in this century. It's one of the most transformative technologies of our lifetimes, if not the most transformative technology of our lifetime. And I think this story that we're leading with here kind of illustrates that. So David, why don't you break it down?
So flight simulation has been one of the primary use cases for virtual reality for decades now, right? It's one of those core use cases that was pioneered in the military and NASA that led to some of the very first VR tech. And decades later, these headsets have gotten significantly better. And we're now getting to the point where headsets are good enough that they are better than traditional monitors and projectors for even professional flight simulation scenarios. And if you caught the show maybe 4 episodes ago or so, you'll remember that we discussed how in the United States, the FAA qualified the first VR based flight simulator for the first time, meaning that pilots could actually use it for official flight training hours. And that was using a Varjo VR3 headset. And now the news here is that the Ukrainian Air Force are using the Varjo XR3. So these are multi-$1,000 expensive high-end premium headsets that aim to deliver retinal resolution in the center, meaning human eye equivalent resolution, so that you can read even the tiniest details in a cockpit. And so for some background context here, and this comes from traditional media like BBC News, Ukraine started receiving the first F-16s in August, intended to boost the country's ability to repel attacks by Russian aircraft on its cities and infrastructure, particularly some of those glide bomb attacks where the only real way to intercept them is to intercept the aircraft themselves, those Russian fighters and fighter bombers. And so around 65 F-16s have been pledged to the country by NATO countries, including the Netherlands and Denmark. But Ukraine's president and military has publicly said that the limiting factor in utilizing these F-16s is the lack of pilots trained to fly them. Until now, Ukraine's Air Force has been using Soviet jets, which have significant differences to Western jets like the F-16. So, to help make this F-16 training program faster, more convenient, and lower cost, a Czech startup, Dogfight Boss, says it delivered to the Ukrainian Air Force a simulator that uses Varjo XR3 mixed reality headset alongside a replica F-16 cockpit that they built. They say that they spent almost a year fine-tuning this simulator with the help of European F-16 pilot instructors, and they shared the following statement that they say came from the Ukrainian Air Force. Our pilots and cadets were deeply impressed by the advanced and realistic features of the F-16 Viper simulator. These features are essential for pilot training, providing an effective environment to practice with sophisticated flight systems, fine-tune their strategies, and prepare for future missions. And the company behind this, that Czech startup, says that they are now getting both government and private sector funding for up to 8 more simulators so that Ukraine can really get as many F-16 pilots ready as quickly as possible to combat those Russian attacks.
Quentin, one of our members there saying, I know a Ukrainian friend who bought a Quest 3 because his army friends back in Ukraine were telling him how cool using VR was. I think that's an interesting comment to put in context of this pipeline from military simulation use, the use case where human lives are on the line based on the use of simulation to affect who dies, who lives, and how to wage war. That's one of the things that is going to, I think, continue to unfold in the next few years. Hearing how and understanding how simulation affects war is something that we're going to be on top of here at UploadVR.com. I appreciate David for that careful rundown of where we are with this bit of news. Yeah, I think that's it for this bit of news. Is there anything specific you want to add here?
Nothing specific here, just that this really highlights how VR and AR are going to transform training and simulation. It's something that we focus a lot on the consumer sector in this show and in general, but we do try to highlight these usage in enterprise and government as well, because so there's an analogy here that for many people, the first personal computer they used was at work, right? This is something that seems to have been memory hold in terms of adoption of technology. We always talk about adoption of new technologies these days in terms of consumers. But what happened with people in the 90s is that they got a computer at their work, and beforehand they were using a typewriter or just pen and paper. And then they started to see some of the use cases, advertised for consumer usage, and they had this knowledge of using a computer at work, seeing how easy it was, and then transferring that into consumer space. And I think we could start seeing a lot of that in general. This is just a much more general sort of take than the specific use. But I think a lot of people are going to use good mixed reality and virtual reality for the first time at work. And then you'll see some of the consumer use cases bubble out of that. The only other thing I was going to add here is that the Ukraine war is very much so a showcase for the technologies of future wars, and it'll be interesting to see, as some of the commenters are pointing out, how this may be used for remote piloting and also command and control. We talked about that in the show before, the idea of using VR and AR to visualize the entire battle space in a way that's just superior to 2D visualization, because you have that extra sense of depth and you can visualize, aircraft and ground units in a much more effective way.
Yeah, I think it's completing a circle here of things that were military grade by definition because of their price, maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, becoming now $300, $500 consumer products, and still potentially being useful for the same purposes as the much more expensive hardware of yesteryear. Varjo is not that, though. What is the price tag, you would guess, on a simulator of this caliber, David? How
You're probably talking for the entire thing, including the cockpit and the markup that the company puts, probably on the order of 50 to 100,000. That's a guess. You have to realize that flying a real F-16 costs in fuel and maintenance cost that much per hour, right? When you take into account the jet fuel and the maintenance and all of the ground ops you need, the ability to put someone in this that costs the equivalent of 1 hour of operating a real aircraft and get them up to skill to be ready to use it, it's a game changer. We really cannot stress how transformative it is to be able to highly realistically simulate a high cost asset like this and train pilots. This is going to be a game changer for Ukraine, and it's going to be a game changer in how pilots are trained in general. We talked about that news last month about the FAA qualified simulator. The cost of training a pilot is about to significantly reduce with this technology, and that's going to address the pilot shortage that exists around the world in both the civilian and military sector. This is how pilots will be trained in the future, and it's starting now.
Yeah, very, very significant trends to think about. And we thank you all in our audience for your support and our coverage of these topics. You can email us information at tips@uploadvr.com. We don't respond to all those emails. We're not very good at responding to them, but we do see the emails as they stream in. And so when interesting things pop up, they catch our eyes and we try to follow up on them. One of the most interesting ones, David, got sent to me this week. I talked about a little bit on the Gamescast, but it was a Raspberry Pi mounted to the strap of the Quest Pro, and they had the capture card on one side and the Raspberry Pi on the other side, and it was a whole solution built into the head strap of a portable computer in addition to your VR headset wherever you go. Really, really fantastic idea, and one of those things that streams into our email. We try to cover and figure out how we can shine a light on all these interesting things that we discover. The remote piloting and this space is one we're going to have to be on top of, I think, more and more. David has been really, really good point about how we focus on the consumer space, but everything you're just describing there is a lot of consumers getting introduced to the idea of remote piloting. Over on the Gamescast, we've got Don Hopper talking about Skyrunner, and that was previously known as Bomber Drone, and it uses some of these same concepts for a complete game experience, right? It's a full gamified version of the same sorts of things you were just discussing a few minutes ago. To take things in like a funner direction, right? I always think of Dune. I'm a big fan of the movie Dune, and if you remember in the movie Dune, there was the Harkonnen assassin built into the wall. He basically was installed on the wall, and then he piloted a portable little drone about this big and tried to kill Paul Atreides. The thing that I love so much about that depiction in the movie is there's no explanation given really at all. He just shows that the director just shows us a single shot of this assassin in the wall, and they're clearly wearing a VR headset to control this drone assassin. But like, it's one shot in the movie, and you instantly know what technology is being depicted there 10,000 years in the future, and it's still a VR headset. And it's science fiction, but it's also very, 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 very close to what we're talking about here.
I think we're ready to move on to our MetaQuest section of the show. We have commenter LL asking whether this is live or pre-recorded. You can probably guess from my answer that it is live, as the commenters Nicholas Jansen and Andrew Tech are telling you. So we're going to move on to the MetaQuest section, starting with V69. And we did discuss the headline feature here beforehand because it had been made available as a public test channel release. So at the time, Ian covered it in that context, but it's now available as a stable release. And so the headline features here in the V69 update for Quest are that, firstly, free window positioning is no longer experimental. So that feature that we've talked about where you can pull out up to 3 extra windows and place them anywhere in space in addition to your 3 pinned windows on your menu bar, that's now just how the Quest operating system Horizon OS works. It's no longer experimental. But the flagship new feature, which is experimental in V69, is seamless multitasking, which Ian is using now, and Ian has been a big proponent of since it arrived in that public test channel. And you can see in this screenshot what that means. It means that you can keep open your pinned browser windows or 2D apps of any sort while you're inside an immersive app. So here you see I'm in Demio, I'm playing Demio, so it has my input focus. I'm using the Demio hands, and yet I have this YouTube video, which could be Netflix or could be any 2D app I've sideloaded, playing, continuing to be there. And that's obviously real multitasking for the first time. It means that it's not just having multiple 2D apps open in your home space. It is being in VR and having 2D applications running at the same time without needing to minimize it to actually use the application. And there are so many use cases this opens up in addition to the obvious one of watching Netflix while you play a game. The one limitation here, which is a notable limitation, is that there's no depth blending here. This will always be rendered on top of the virtual content. So even if something in the VR game is closer than this 2D app, the 2D app will appear in front of it. And that's something that we've talked about in mixed reality, where we call it occlusion there. There's no occlusion here. Now, the Quest compositor, the Horizon OS compositor, does actually allow applications to submit a depth buffer. I'm not sure if Demio just doesn't use it, but even when I tested it in this app with a depth buffer, it doesn't appear to use it. So it's possible Meta could update that in the future to do some depth testing, but that would present obvious issues in that, what if you were in like a virtual elevator where your 2D apps would be behind it? They're obviously going to have to do some sort of transparency effect there, but it's a roughness that is annoying. But look, if you can manually position it somewhere where that's not a problem. So in Demio, I just place it kind of up here where there's no virtual objects anyway. This is just great, especially for slow-paced games, right? Being able to sit in there and enjoy the game while watching your content, that's exactly what people want.
Yeah, I did go use this multitasking feature to go comment live to our viewers. So I've been interacting with them using multitasking live on the show. Really, really cool to have that ability. Also very distracting. You pointed out not to get distracted, and I am completely distracted in several different directions here. I just need to give you kudos for, I think, one of the best featured images we've ever had on an article on UploadVR.com for this image that David came up with for this article, depicting it's a screen for people that are watching on the podcast or listening on the podcast. It's a Simpsons image from one of their many times mentioning VR over the years, as prophetic as they are, and he's pulled that up inside with the multitasking feature. Yeah, I saw a joke here asking whether I'm playing Switch. I have not been able to play Switch with the I have been able to play Switch with the multitasking, but I haven't done it in the last little bit because I've been just doing everything else on Earth imaginable that I can think of with the multitasking. Last night, I had a Blu-ray movie straight from disc, ported through a network of capture cards all the way over to my headset. Went from a PS4 to a PC to my headset. and I had a full Blu-ray disc playing straight in my headset while doing other things. Really mind-boggling how much it opens up to people in headsets that just wasn't available before. I'm and like I said, with the Raspberry Pi stuff, I'm not alone in my experimentations from Raspberry Pis on up. Cyberdeck is a very popular idea. This idea of having a little portable computer that maybe is headless, has no display on it, or maybe a little itty bitty display, and then you've got a massive virtual display to pull up in VR. Very, very cool idea that is only made possible and only really doable now that you can do multitasking like this.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. With external devices, there's all these kind of use cases, but there's another thing that we haven't mentioned that you can do completely standalone. And this is actually a news topic I think I kind of forgot to make be an official news topic for the show, but I can blend it in now, which is that in Messenger, Facebook Messenger on Quest, you can now actually share your first person view. And if you combine these features, what you can do is instead of this video playing, the Simpsons video, I could have a video call with my friend and I will see their face up here from their video camera, while what they see is my first person perspective playing the VR game. So you're kind of just like hanging out with a friend remotely. You see them, they see you playing the VR game. That's an interesting use case there for sure. So Quentin is asking if there are limits for performance here, saying, I can't imagine you can stream YouTube and play something like the upcoming Batman game. So that's a good point. Obviously, this is not performance free. It's not magic. But an interesting thing here is that many Quest apps use dynamic resolution now, and Meta strongly encourages developers to use dynamic resolution. And so what will happen in this case is that as that YouTube 2D window takes away a little bit of performance from the VR app, the system will bring down the resolution of the VR app so that performance stays the same and you lose a little bit of resolution in the VR app. And that's going to be an acceptable trade-off for a lot of people if you want to have that YouTube playing at the same time. I'm not sure Batman would be the kind of game you would want this in, though, because you're obviously doing a lot of movement around. I really think this is going to be best for the kind of seated, slower games, but I'm sure people will completely ignore what I just said and do it in fast-paced games anyway, because everyone's different and has their own preferences around this sort of thing.
I don't know if you saw. I gotta throw in the reference out there because I'll cover it as soon as I possibly can. But I haven't had time to do this latest test. But it looked to me like the ALVR Vision OS beta, the very earliest version of this software for streaming Steam VR games to Vision OS. They figured out how to get acceleration data over to Half-Life Alyx from the Joy-Con controllers. So yeah, I'll let our audience and you, David, extrapolate from that.
Yeah, I think we'll maybe talk about that separately to the Quest update. There are a few other things in the V69 update that are important to note. So we've talked about free window positioning no longer being experimental. We've talked about seamless multitasking, this use case. The other one is content adaptive brightness control. This was actually announced as coming in V68, but it simply didn't. Meta's done this before. They say a big feature is coming, and then it doesn't, and then later on they bring it up in another update. So I've tried this. I have CABC, Content Adaptive Brightness Control, on my Quest 3. It's an experimental option. And what it does, if you're unfamiliar, it's similar to what you'll see in some LCD televisions, is that in very dark scenes, it will actually dim the backlight. So it'll bring the brightness down automatically for the duration of that dark scene, so that instead of like a murky, hazy gray, you get a deeper black. Still nowhere near OLED, of course, but it at least means that LCD's horrible approximation of black isn't as horrible. Now, on Quest 3, this is a very subtle effect. The CIBC is incredibly subtle. It only really activates in the darkest of scenes, but it's a nice little touch so that when you're in a completely dark loading screen, for example, you do get a more real darkness. It's still not going to be anywhere near OLED or even anywhere near local dimming that you get on Quest Pro and some of the other PC VR headsets. This is an LCD panel. No software can magically work around that. It's a very subtle effect and helps ever so slightly, but it's not going to fix the fact that this is an LCD panel. The other major update in V69 is spatial audio for 2D windows. So spatial audio is already a thing in the vast majority of immersive games or immersive apps, VR games and apps of all kinds. This refers to when you're in the home space or you're using this seamless multitasking feature. It just means that audio will sound like it's coming from each 2D window. So this Simpsons video, for example, would sound like it's coming from this location. And if I had another window over here, it would sound like it's coming from over here. It's a nice little touch. It's something that is in Apple Vision Pro. Obviously, Vision OS has this by default, and it's a nice little touch. There are 4 minor changes then in V69. I'll just list them off. We don't need to go into them. Remove apps from library. That was announced as happening in the past, but Meta claims it's actually going to happen this time. So all those demos and shovelware that you downloaded once and never want to see in your library again, you can apparently get rid of it. Frictionless home environment. If you're in Pass-Through in Quest 3 and you've just booted it up and you go into your home environment, Meta says it'll now put you into a stationary Guardian by default instead of asking you. So that's, I guess, helpful if you want to use a stationary, but it's an extra step if you want to go into room scale. Bluetooth quick pairing. If you put a Bluetooth device into pairing mode near your Quest headset, that could be a keyboard, a gamepad, even, dare I say, a Joy-Con, you'll get a pop-up notification in your headset saying, do you want to pair, rather than having to manually jump into Bluetooth settings. Again, minor quality of life improvement. They also say there's a new home environment called Oceanarium. Don't think that's rolled out yet, but hopefully it's higher quality than the existing home environments, because as I will soon write an editorial about, they are terrible.
Yeah, he has some he bottles it up for you all on this show with VR download, but his rage for the home environments is palpable. I can feel in our Slack channels when I talk to him how mad he is at how awful those home environments are. We've got an audience building up here. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. We tend to build up an audience through the course of the show. People stick around, keep us in the background as they're going through VR now because of the multitasking feature. Thank you for everyone who tunes in, however you tune into our show. And we tend to build towards big discussions towards the end. We've got a very supportive community out there in our comments. If you have any basic questions about VR, new questions, trying to figure things out, go ahead and ask it. We ready to talk about the next bit of Quest news here, or is there anything else you want to talk about here?
Yeah, let's go straight into it. We have seen even more images of Quest 3S leaking ahead of its expected launch at Meta Connect later this month. So if you've been living under a virtual rock for the past 6 months, Quest 3S is going to be Meta's next headset. They haven't officially announced it, but there have been so many leaks and reports that we can say almost certainly there's going to be a cheaper version of Quest 3 announced at Meta Connect and perhaps even launched that keeps Quest 3's chipset, so with that twice as powerful GPU, and has Quest 3's color pass-through mixed reality capabilities, including scene meshing, but uses Quest 2's old Fresnel lenses and single panel to achieve a cheaper cost. We think that cheaper cost could be somewhere between $300 and $400, which compares to the $500 of the main Quest 3. So this week we've seen in the Meta Quest Link PC files, there is an official render. This is in the official application of Quest 3S. And you see here the downwards facing side cameras in the exact same position as Quest 3. Those are for inside out body tracking and for out wide hand tracking, controller tracking. We see groups of 3 sensors on each side of the headset here. We expect that one is a color pass-through camera, another is a general tracking camera for hand tracking and headset tracking and controller tracking. And then the third is an infrared illuminator or projector of some kind to help with hand tracking in the dark and depth sensing. So this should have the same capabilities as Quest 3, but with an inferior quality of experience. And the same time we see this image leak, we have accessory makers selling accessories for Quest 3S on AliExpress already. So these are Chinese companies that obviously have access to some insider information, likely from the production lines. You see a silicon cover here. Here's another one where you see an Elite strap, obviously a third-party Elite strap. This is a really good angle where you can see the USB-C port on the same side. This indicates The fact that this is for Quest 3 and Quest 3S indicates that Quest 3 accessories should be compatible with Quest 3S. So the depth of the front is different, the thickness of the front, but when it comes to actually, strapping on these head straps, your Bobo VR straps, and other accessory makers, those should all be compatible, except of course for things that go on the front. For example, this drop protection silicon kit, where it's specifically designed for the sensor setup here, and obviously with holes for the thermals and the microphone. But it's remarkable that we're already seeing accessories being sold from these Chinese companies for a headset that Meta has not announced, right? They have not announced this headset. And to remind you, here is the very first design leak we saw back in March, when some people dismissed it as being fake. And if you compare that image right there to the one that's in the official PC files, you can see we're pretty much certain at this point that this is the design of this headset. I don't think there's much else to say about Quest 3S. It really isn't that complicated of a product, right? It's, depending on how you look at it, it's a Quest 3 with Quest 2's display and lenses, or it's a Quest 2 with Quest 3's chipset and sensor capabilities. Whichever way you want to look at it, that's what the product is, and it looks like it's going to replace Quest 2 and deliver that experience of Quest 3 at a cheaper price.
Yeah, so we put those first two stories together, just conceptually at least. You think about multitasking as well as this headset arriving, and you start imagining the places Meta's platform can go in the very near future. The performance hit. There is a performance hit when you start activating multitasking on a Quest 3. I've noticed it when I've gotten 3 windows up and running at the same time. I've had things like my remote display to my Mac over here, my HDMI link to my PC over here, and then I've had the Quest browser here with 5 tabs open right here. And then I'm also in my experience like we are right now. The UploadVR Studios is as good as any other VR experience that you might have while doing this multitasking experience. And while launching all of those things simultaneously, you can feel the system trying to figure out which thing to focus on at any given moment, which thing to give all of the resources to. And I'm sure Meta's going to put a lot of people, or at least very highly paid people, on the task of improving that functionality over time. But there's only so much they can do with this chipset now, right? This chipset is going to carry them through the next 2 to 3 years on both the Quest 3 and the Quest 3S. But there's also there's a higher end. There is an opportunity for Meta to have partners who do a higher end headset with a better chipset that maybe does some of this multitasking even better.
So I actually don't think the chipset is what's limiting here. I think it's the RAM, right? But your general point is right. It's possible that we'll see those Horizon OS headsets from Asus and Lenovo come along with more RAM. Quest 2 had 6 gigabytes of RAM, and Quest 3 and very likely Quest 3S have 8 gigabytes of RAM. And so a lot of people argued at the time that that wasn't enough of a jump for potential future use cases. And I think Meta did make a mistake in only putting 8 gigabytes in these things. We've seen Pico 4 Ultra, that we talked about extensively last week, has 12 gigabytes of RAM, and they're using that to allow up to 20 windows. And I think there's going to be use cases in which that is a better multitasking headset. And I think, given that Quest 3 was probably in development years ago, before Meta really thought about this multitasking as being something that was key important in this generation, I wonder if they regret it. And I think what we will see is Quest 4. I don't think they're going to skimp this time. I think they're going to put enough RAM in Quest 4, which reportedly will arrive in 2026, 2 years from now. I think they'll put enough RAM for future proofing. And this is something we've actually seen in other tech sectors, right? Apple famously was, what's the word here? Reluctant to put a lot of RAM in the iPhone. They thought this was a good way to do cost cutting. And they also kind of had this idea of, iOS's memory management is so great that we're not going to need to do it. And then AI came along, and they're now scrambling to put more and more RAM into the iPhone so that they can do on-device AI. And that's why the iPhone 15 base model from last year, will not support Apple Intelligence, right? You have to have the Pro model because it is more RAM. So I think Apple made the mistake of skimping with RAM. Meta has made the mistake of skimping with RAM. These companies need to learn, just put more memory in and future proof it, even if you have to take a little bit of cost here, because it means that you can deliver on these features in the future. It seems to be, it's a mistake we saw with the console generation too, right? The PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, they underspec the RAM, and there were huge issues going forward there. I don't think they're going to make the same mistake with Quest 4.
Interesting commentary there. There are, of course, differences in the overall architecture of the ecosystems here, right? Apple has its end-to-end control system worked out much more to kind of manage your process from, you know, the moment you look at it with your eyeballs to the moment you hit on the keyboard or thumbprint in or use your face scan. Like, Apple's controlling the stream of everything to try to improve that experience, even though they have maybe things like more limited RAM. That said, you're absolutely right. Like, multitasking is one of the core things that make these headsets so magical now. Like, that's what has happened overnight with these headsets, is just wanting to be surrounded with dozens of windows, right? I've got a lifetime's worth of content stored in various places, and I want to bring it all into the headset with me. And it's kind of silly that you're not able to. It's been silly that we haven't been able to. So that's changing right now, and I'm appreciating the comments where people are pointing out that it's going to be hard for people to know whether the 3S or the 3 is going to be better. The thing that's going to be funny to hear from Meta, and they've already done this repeatedly with their talking points. To Meta, the best headset is the highest selling headset. It doesn't matter that maybe the 3 has more storage if they decide to tier it that way, or that the 3 is a little bit thinner optically. To Meta, all that matters is getting to hundreds of millions and billions of people's heads, and the way they do that is lower cost devices. And you'll hear it again in their marketing, the way they talk about these things. You've got a $3,500 headset from Apple or a $300 headset from Meta, and you can do very similar things with each, is going to be the argument at the end of the day. And maybe it works a lot better on Apple, but maybe you don't need it to have a heck of a time in VR.
And I think from a consumer's perspective, this idea that people are going to get confused, it's just not the case, because the price will be different, right? Nobody's going to look at the $300 headset and the $500 headset and go, I wonder which one is better, when they're both selling alongside each other and the $500 one is thinner. I do understand that S in some cases has meant better, and it is a confusing name. It's not the name I would have chosen, but Microsoft has done it with Xbox Series S, right? It's the cheaper version. We'll have to see what happens there, but I think once the news gets out, it's not going to take that long for people to understand Quest 3S is the cheaper one. And as you say, for Meta, what matters is the one that people buy. And when people see that one of them is affordable for them and one isn't, they're going to pick the one that is affordable, and that's the point.
What are the storage sizes of the current model headsets that we have? So we just have this on record with our audience, so we can remember in case they change out the storage models, the base sizes. What right now, as we head into Meta Connect very soon, what are the prices? It's $500 and $600 for the two Quest 3s.
So it's $500 for 128 gigabytes and $650 for 512 gigabytes.
So there's an opportunity for them to move 512 as the base standard, in my opinion. I think that's where I would love to see it for Quest.
I don't see
3.
that happening. I don't see that happening. Maybe we'll see the 128 moved up to 256, but
yeah, that makes more sense.
They're trying to get out of the era of aggressive subsidization. We think that Quest 3 is probably sold just at cost rather than at a loss. We don't know, of course, but that's just what we've heard from the supply chain. It will. I don't think they're going to have a 512 3S, right? I think we're going to see a 128 and a 256 for the 3S, and then it is weird in a way that you can get under this assumption that you'll be able to get a higher storage 3S for cheaper than a Quest 3. But again, that the difference is going to be the lenses and displays there, right?
So what's really fun to start thinking about as well, our audience has already started building these, right? They've come to our emails to describe these systems, but imagine a head strap that moves the cord to the back of the head, it's funny. I've seen it in our comments. I've seen it on various sites. The way the USB cord connects to your head can totally change how heavy the headset feels overall. It totally changes how much it can snag on nearby things or how easily it could disconnect. So like it's such a silly thing that gets overlooked, but the way the USB cord connects to your head is going to be an important thing in this next phase of personal computing. The Vision Pro has this cool like snap-in connector on the back of your head. What I would love to see very near future is a capture card built into a head strap, and then moving the USB cord to the back of the head so it runs down your back or around your side instead of getting tangled up near the front of the headset and the front of your body. You could instead move all of that to the back and potentially have power in and a capture card coming in from a single cord that way.
Yeah, that certainly would be ideal for those use cases, but I would stress that the vast majority of Quest usage is with nothing on the USB port, right? People are just charging it, picking it up, picking up the controllers and going. And we may see one of those Horizon OS third-party headsets be built around that kind of use case with a battery in the back and data pass through. But I just don't think we're going to see that in the mainline Quest. Are we ready to talk about Meta CTO comments on the motion trackers?
Yep, let's move on to this one. It's a very big area to discuss because as we speak, right now in the studio, David has a secret. He has no legs.
And Ian also has the same secret. You're acting as if it's only me. You just don't want to admit it. This is an interesting story because I think we got more comments on both the website and on social media for this one than almost any other article in the past few weeks. People really have very strong opinions on this one way or the other. Some people are very much so agreeing with Meta's CTO, and some people are almost in a hatred of disbelief that he would even dare say this. So I'll just actually catch anyone up in case they're not familiar here. These on screen right now are the Pico trackers. They are €80, or I believe actually, sorry, €90 to correct myself. They strap onto your ankles and add leg tracking to your Pico headset. They have really quick calibration. You just look down at your legs and the camera is sorted out for you. They weigh very little, so little that I did not even feel having them on. I talked about last week how I walked off, not realizing I had them on. They are so light, very frictionless, as much as frictionless as trackers can be. They have 25 hours of active battery life. They charge via USB-C, and they can be used as independent object trackers instead of leg trackers. So companies, businesses, enterprise can make custom objects with them and even pass through USB data. So you can make your own VR controller with this, and this part will handle the tracking. All you need to do is the triggers and buttons and whatever else you want to put on there. Now, Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, was asked in an Instagram Ask Me Anything session the simple question, is Meta working on an equivalent, right? I said last week when talking about Pico 4 Ultra's launch that these things are the star of the show and it would be great for Meta to do them. Someone has asked Bosworth this question, and here is his answer. No. Those Pico trackers seem cool, and I think it's fun that they're doing that. I haven't had a chance to play with any of the new stuff out of Pico, but it's great to see people continuing to push and innovate and try different things. I think there's just not that many use cases where people need that high a degree of precision on extremities. It's not zero if you're a dance enthusiast in VR chat and you want to show off those moves. That's great. I'm glad people have a chance to do that and they have a path for that. But I think getting this thing to be mainstream where we make something that just way more people use, I'm not sure that the juice is worth the squeeze. And I don't mean that from a business perspective. I mean it even for the consumer in terms of what they get out of it. And this is the interesting part. The last part is last sentence. I hope it goes so well for them and they prove me wrong, and then we'll have to do it. So his answer is essentially no, unless These things are such a breakout success and drive so many Pico headset sales that it's a clear direction for the industry. And then in that case, according to Bosworth, Meta CTO, Meta will make their own.
Am I getting that right? That if you want to break Meta's monopoly in VR, Meta's emerging monopoly in VR, you could just go get Pico legs?
Well, if you want Meta to do this, if you want Meta to go and yeah, that's right. But also, if you want Meta to do this, ironically, he's telling people go out and buy Pico headsets. Obviously, not enough people are going to see that message and care to cause any kind of consumer movement here. It would be funny if people bought these things for €90, not even to use them, not even with a Pico headset, but just to send the signal to the industry that they want.
We need legs. We need legs. We do need legs. I I'm a I'm a big believer in legs. Let's move on to our next subject
Whoa,
here,
hold,
unless
hold.
there's anything we should specifically talk about in the
Yeah, I
comments.
mean, I think we want to talk about the argument each side, right? So, as you said, you're a big proponent of legs. I'm a big proponent of legs. Not only do they have that use case Bosworth brought up, which is obviously social expression, which includes dancing in VR chat and just showing your legs in general. That is a huge use
Uh,
case, but there are also gaming use cases. You can have football, as Americans would call soccer.
uh,
There are all kinds of interesting gaming potential.
uh,
Uh, on Pico and their demo, they showed I think it was called Foot Pool or something like that, where you have these giant pool balls on your floor. It's a mixed reality app, and you can kick them around your floor. There's all kind of use cases here, and the thing is, right, as a commenter pointed out, I think this is a pretty good argument. Meta is pissing away billions in this industry on some really esoteric research and some content that nobody wants in cases. I'm not saying always, but there are all of these things that Meta spends money on. Would making these things really cost so much? Like, this is an IMU and some IR LEDs, right? It's a touch controller without the thumbsticks, buttons, and triggers. It would not cost Meta that much to do it. It would. Their enthusiast community would love them for it. You would get so much viral marketing, right, from the body tracking being shown and demonstrated on TikTok and Instagram, and people saying that this is all standalone, you don't need a PC or base stations. It seems like the juice might be worth the squeeze in that sense. But Bosworth's argument, to go on the other side, is that Meta's focus is not on delivering what enthusiasts that already use VR want. Meta's focus is on bringing the next 20 million and then 50 million and then 100 million and eventually billion people into VR. And they don't think yet another device that you have to charge and strap to yourself is any part of that mission of bringing VR to a billion people.
Arguably, they killed Portal while not pursuing that as an avenue. This question was asked of Bosworth back then, whether the Portal calling device had an overlap to use with the area of the Quest headsets, and they were like, "No, that we don't see the overlap right now." This has been the story all along. Meta has said, "Not right now, not right now," to numerous projects over the years, and I I don't there's two things in my head that like always compete. Like, how maddening would it be to be an employee at Meta over the years and you've watched genuinely amazing, cool ideas just utterly squashed by by the fact that it doesn't fit into the larger corporate strategy. This not right now uh, idea of building a platform, right? They had the Quest, they had the Oculus system on PC. They had Rift and Rift S, and they had these customizable homes where you could do anything you wanted with your space around you. You could put up anything you wanted. They had to let all of that die. They killed all of it in order to rebuild from the ground up this standalone system, this operating system, all these things that are inside of it. But we know that they had tens of thousands of employees, thousands of people they've let go, people who could not release projects, people who whittled away on ideas in the dark, on things that never saw the light of day, because it got run up the chain to one of these executives who said, no, it's just the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, and I think Bosworth has hinted in the past that that's where we get some of these articles that talk about these cancelled products from, that the employees who have spent blood, sweat, and tears building this pro headset or whatever, then go off to the information journalists and say, here's what we were building and here's what Zuckerberg and Bosworth told us we can't build anymore. I'm going to address a couple of comments here. Quentin M is asking, they say, I might have missed it. Do these leg trackers flat out not work on Quest? No, these are Pico trackers. They are very much so a fusion of hardware and software built into the Pico OS. So the calibration is done by the headset's cameras, using tracking IR LEDs that are in these things. They obviously pair automatically to the headset as well, or not automatically, but very quickly in a streamlined way. They are fed into a skeletal model that is using the Pico headset, the Pico controllers, and these ankle trackers all together. And then they have a hybrid tracking model where whenever the headset can see them, their IR LEDs are doing real 6DoF tracking. And whenever it can't, it's using the IMU data fused with your headset and controller tracking data, fused with the last known 6DoF position from the IR LEDs to give you a very plausible position of your legs. And I tried this, and it really works really well. You can read other people's impressions as well. These things work and they're great. They are actually great, especially for the fact that they're only €90. These are a great product. They work. The other comment, people were asking, why make Quest Pro at all then, if the argument is that you don't want to make things that don't move the market? I think Meta now considers Quest Pro a mistake, right? Like they pretty quickly gave up on that idea. It is the ugly stepchild of Quest headsets to Meta, right? And we've seen that reportedly a 2024 Quest Pro 2 was cancelled and a 2027 Quest Pro 2 was cancelled. So it does look like the answer is they don't want either, right? Meta doesn't care about making things for the existing enthusiasts. I'll say it again. They want to get the next 100 million people, the next billion people into VR. And that is like it or not, that's their strategy. And the path to that is low cost hardware and less friction, not more. They want to get rid of friction, not add another device you have to charge and strap to yourself.
And I that's understandable. But I think the people are talking about Echo VR over in the comments, and I'm thinking about the Ender's Game meme or idea that the other team's gate is open, right? Okay, so what we've got here is a hole in the market where full body tracking in standalone form factor would be a tremendous win. It's interesting. If you look back at the past, Meta came out and said, we've got the technology on the R&D board to do an external pass-through display to show your eyeballs, show fake eyeballs on the outside of the display. So Meta came out and said, we've got this research. It's actually really cool research. You can simulate eyes on the external outside of the headset. They didn't ship it. We and others looked at it and said, that looks really weird. I don't see the reason for it. It doesn't seem like it would be worth the wait to add that to an HMD to put all that extra display on the front of the headset. Apple made a choice, and people in our comments, people just sitting there watching, don't like to give credit to these choices sometimes. Like everyone makes, like, at the end of the day, everyone is going to arrive at the same product, right? We're all going to see bigs, like the same way we ended up with 10 different slabs of glass. That's the only choice you have in mobile phones. We're going to arrive at VR headsets that are more or less capable of doing all the same things with slight variations in specifications over time, right? You'll have one that does really good movie viewing, one that does really good fitness, one that's really lightweight, but all the same basic stuff internally. Well, this external display was one of those things that Apple has come out and said, you've got to have it. It seems like a necessity of their platform. I wonder whether Meta is going back to the drawing board and considering whether they should have included that. And then there's a question whether there's other things that could have, could do that. And I think of full body tracking as this it's the key to health in VR. It's, how many people are frustrated by the 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 low quality data that you get out of your watch for tracking your activity. Like, it took years of progress on Apple's software system for you to go out and be able to be walking for 20 minutes in with an Apple Watch on, and then 20 minutes into your walk, you get a pop-up on your wrist that says, "Are you doing an outdoor walk? Would you like to record this health data and have it added to your tracking health ecosystem?" And so you get this pop-up that says, "Okay, yes, start recording your health data." And boom, all that 20 minutes of exertion and exercise is now getting put into that store of data for all your health data. The moment you're wearing the VR headset, you should be able to get better health data out of what you're getting out of the headset. And then you add on a wrist tracker or potentially other trackers, and it only gets better from there. There's a huge opportunity for Apple to do a fitness headset next year. That's a very long-winded way to say, take what Pico's doing even further here on Apple's take Apple's services, their products, all of that, hone it into a fitness-based headset, and you have a really interesting answer to everything Meta's doing next year.
Yeah, and I think even from a Quest perspective, this idea of, what we're talking about, should Meta make these Quest trackers, it would be a huge addition to fitness, right? You do see Meta trying to push fitness as this key use case of Quest headsets. It is taking off in some ways with apps like Supernatural and Les Mills, but I do think not having the legs is a missing factor there. And the one thing I would say to Boz, if he was listening, which I doubt he is that Meta has gone too low in the past, right? We know that. Oculus Go, with that bet, Meta was saying, we don't want $6 here. We're trying to expand the market as much as possible. We can get to $200 if we just cut out the cameras and release a headset without $6, and it was a failure, right? So it is possible to go too low. And I think beyond even fitness, it's just embodiment, right? Body tracking in VR. You do get upper body tracking with Quest 3 with its cameras, but having your full body, including your legs, is a sense of embodiment that you really, it's like having hand tracking for the first time or VR controllers for the first time. It matters and it's significant to look down and see a virtual body that is matching the position of your real body, and especially in social situations, seeing other people's body language come across, as people are saying in the comments. And
I thought I want to talk about one comment. I saw someone joking about Star Wars and imagining what's his name, Darth Maul from Episode 1, and splitting people right down the middle there. It's such a funny image, but imagine you're playing an online sword fighting game, and every person you slice apart, you watch their legs kick around on the floor after you've cut them in two. It would be hilarious just on the sight of it, like to see that effect on another player. And I don't know, it's just a funny little image to imagine. Leg tracking there as a way to express frustration in a game would be hilarious.
Or even to attack, right? And this isn't going to be a hypothetical. And I'm going to address 2 points at once, which is that, and the people in the comments that are saying, oh, developers won't build for this. Well, Blade and Sorcery Nomad, one of the best games on standalone VR, is going to add support for these on Pico, giving you leg tracking. And we don't know the details yet, but I imagine based on seeing everything that Blade and Sorcery has done so far, that you're going to be able to, when you're really frustrated and your sword's going here and your shield's going here, just kick an enemy out of the way. I could totally see that happening. Again, I haven't confirmed their exact implementation, but it seems like the obvious one. And that's just an addition in itself, right? And how many melee games do you want to have the ability to kick? And that is a big part of fighting. You can imagine how thrilling that would feel, right? To be slashing one enemy with one hand, bashing someone with a shield on your right, and then kicking the guy in front of you out of the way. It's a type of satisfaction that we're going to see on Pico, and we're not going to see on Quest. And I think that kind of wraps it up for me.
Yep, I think we're good there. Very, very good discussion. Even David's little pantomime there, I could feel the absence of his legs in his little kick. Like it felt missing, and I want that in VR, and we've got to have better tracking. I do believe it's worth the squeeze to use Bosworth's language there. Let's talk about this next bit of news. Are we ready to move on to Apple? Is that it?
Yeah, the next section is our Apple section. So we're going to talk about iPhone first, then we're going to talk about immersive videos, and then a report about the idea that Apple could release much cheaper vision headsets using regular OLED panels. So let's first talk about iPhone, and you may instantly be saying, why on earth are we talking about the iPhone on a VR AR show? Well, the reason is that the regular iPhone 16, the base model, all iPhone 16 models, if you want to put it another way, have spatial capture support now. And Apple says that they also, for the first time, can capture spatial photos as well as spatial videos. And the background here is that last year, the iPhone 15 Pro models, the Pro and the Pro Max, debuted this ability in iPhone where they can record 3D spatial videos. And well, now all iPhone 16 models can record spatial photos and spatial videos. And given the scale of iPhone, this means that pretty soon, in a matter of months, there will be hundreds of millions of people in total in the world with a 3D camera in their pocket, not hypothetically at home or something in their drawer waiting to charge, in their pocket, ready at any time. And those cameras, those 3D cameras, every single iPhone 16 and the iPhone 15 Pro altogether will, create an exponential increase in the amount of 3D content. And this content that they capture, these 3D photos, these 3D videos, can be viewed in Vision Pro, or they can be viewed on MetaQuest headsets, or they can be viewed on Pico 4 Ultra. And even if you convert them with the app Spatialify, which is on the iPhone App Store, you can view them on your PSVR headset. So it is an interesting scenario where more people will have a 3D capture camera in their pocket than will actually have a way to view it. But I think this is how a lot of people are going to be introduced to the even idea of 3D media. And we know now that at the App Store, in Apple's Vision Pro demos, they've added a new section where they ask the person to airdrop your spatial photos and videos and your panoramas to the Vision Pro. So you can go into the Apple Store and see those 3D photos and videos and all your panoramas in the headset. And that could be a way that headsets are sold. Even not just even Vision Pro, it could be someone that goes in, sees it on a Vision Pro, and then picks up a Quest 3S to view them in a couple of months. This is a big game changer for spatial photos and videos.
Yeah, so people in the comments are very upset about David's pronunciation of the word skeletal. I cannot forgive him for his pronunciation there, but it is real, and he actually says it that way. So I had my family here in New York. Alanis Hamilton is a tennis player. My niece, she's very, very, very good. One of the top people in the U.S. in tennis right now. And she was just playing, she was in town for the U.S. Open, and I got to go out and see her play at the U.S. Open. And there was a video that went viral a little bit showing a kid using a Vision Pro in the audience at the U.S. Open. I took that as my green light to take my Vision Pro to the U.S. Open and try to record a single spatial video from inside the stadium. So I recorded a single point or 2 points of one of Alanis's matches, put on the headset, and captured this spatial video of the scene, brought it back to my house, and I had it basically sitting on the headset for 3 or 4 days with no one around to show it to. Like that, Alanis was competing in the actual competition, didn't have any time to come and look at her own video. My brother didn't have a chance to take a look at it. Finally, this moment came where my brother was back at the house, and I'm like, okay, it's time. Oh, okay. I'll go get the headset. I'll take my prescription lenses off. I'll put on guest mode, which is a new feature in Vision OS 2, and I'll get you into the headset and show you the video. And the first thing I showed him, the very, very first thing I showed my brother in this modern ecosystem, was the spatial video of his kid doing this tennis match. And it was an instant, what happened here? There's the multitasking getting activated. An instant wow moment for him to go face to face basically get inside of my head for that moment to see from my view for a second. And then he was immediately going into the next subject we've got on our show. He was immediately going into the Apple Immersive Video. And it was incredible to watch this demo, David, because I've given VR demos so many times over the years. And here was this moment where I showed him a video that I shot of him and family in this format. He's got the Ray-Ban glasses. He went and got the Ray-Ban glasses just like me. So he's now on the Ray-Ban uh, bandwagon trying to check this stuff out. And I'm like, no, you know what? You need to see what a spatial video looks like. So he's impressed with spatial video, and then he goes to do the Super Bowl video that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And he's blown away. And what was killer to me about it was he saw the spatial video that I shot on the headset, and in the time between watching the spatial video that I shot in my headset and getting into the menu system where he found the Super Bowl video that had launched that very same day, in between that time, he has this idea where he's like, you know what would be amazing? The Super Bowl in this format. He's sitting there going like, I would love to see this Super Bowl. And then he clicks into the menu, and there's the Super Bowl waiting for him. And it's amazing to see Apple already there where some users expect them to be. And that's a long-winded way of saying there is a whole flow here from these two cameras all the way to the Blackmagic cameras I see some in our audience are really curious about. And it's a whole new ecosystem.
Yeah, I think for so many regular people, including, the billions of people who are not in VR today and don't even have a headset and haven't even tried a headset, is what I meant to say there. Real world content, real footage of real world content is so important. And what's even better than someone else's footage is their own, as you say, seeing your own family members, your memories. This is how Apple pitched it. And I think their marketing is right on point there. It was relive memories. And some people in the comments are pointing out validly that, the the interocular distance between these two cameras is not huge. So you're not getting the same sense of depth as you would with a professional 3D camera. Sure, but it is still there, right? I've tried it. I've tried someone else's iPhone 15 Pro 3D spatial video on my Vision Pro and on my Quest 3, and you still get that sense of depth that makes it a far more compelling experience than flat video. And again, what matters here is that people have this in their pocket. There is that old phrase, the best camera is the one that you have in your pocket, because it means that when those memories are happening, you're not running home to go and get your big expensive 3D rig and charging it up and setting it on a tripod and blah, blah, blah. You just take it out of your pocket and press capture or press record, right? It's good to go. Yeah. You have those real memories. And yeah, I think that is so important. And when it comes to the Ray-Ban cameras, the Ray-Ban glasses, I think we're definitely probably going to see the next generation of Ray-Ban glasses, which I think is expected in 2025 or 2026, depending on what Meta decides to do there, have the ability to capture 3D content. And then you'll even have actually a better interocular distance that more closely matches the human eye. Because sure, you can capture these with Vision Pro, but that's not really practical for many use cases. But when you have the ability to capture these kind of things on glasses and then go and view them in your headset, that's going to be very significant indeed.
Yeah, so big thing. Yep, seeing my kids from February launch and my first captures get me so more than regular media. It's so intense to see them from 6 months ago, and it is that feeling you get going through your camera roll from 5 years ago. Think about that, right? That nostalgic feeling tugging at your heart, seeing yesteryear in whatever context it is, but you see depth on every single image, on every single video. You see, it's like peering into a memory just a little bit more. It's a powerful, powerful thing. And as David's pointing out, right, overnight, Apple's computational photography system built into every iPhone 16 is now building libraries and libraries from people who can plan their chart out their life 5 years into the future. Maybe they start capturing certain videos in spatial media right now, knowing that they're going to get a headset in a couple years, getting that first taste of a VR headset and seeing, oh, wow, it actually is more impactful. Maybe I will start recording my videos in this format and get ready for the future. And it's pretty amazing how cool these videos feel. I think we should move on to the Apple Immersive videos pretty soon here, just because it is the high-end version of the same content.
There's just two notes I want to do on these spatial videos just before we move on there. One is that there is one feature that's exclusive to the iPhone 6 models, which is spatial audio capture. So when you're capturing spatial video, you'll actually get positional audio captured so that sounds will sound like they're coming from each person's mouth and, each object that's emitting them. And that's adding an extra level of immersion there to that memory reliving. The other thing is that the big problem here, I think, is that there's no convenient way to share these right now. No platform currently has native support for spatial video. You can convert them using a third-party app to regular 3D and then upload that to YouTube, but that's a friction point that a lot of people are not wanting to go through. What we do know from WWDC, Apple's conference in June, is that Vimeo plans to add native support for spatial videos and an Apple Vision Pro app. So the idea is that from your Vision Pro or your iPhone, you'll be able to just hit upload and go straight up to Vimeo. And then you've got a link there you can share to anyone, and then they can just open that on their Vision Pro. Hopefully, we also see that supported on Quest as well. If you got Vimeo acting as this like pipeline between the Apple ecosystem and Meta, you could really see the sharing taking over here, and that could really help Vimeo in its competition against YouTube. So I think that the sharing is the one thing that's missing there. But as you say, let's move on to talk about immersive video, Apple Immersive Video. So just for any viewers that aren't sure the distinction between what we're talking about, spatial video, these things you can capture on these iPhones and Vision Pro, they are 3D, but they're within a rectangle, right? It's a regular video, a regular rectangular video you take, except it has 3D depth. But Apple Immersive Video is the next level, and it's currently captured by the camera on the left here. These really high-end, expensive, multi-tens of thousands of dollar cameras, and it is 180 degrees and 3D. So it's not just in a rectangle, it's your entire frontal 180-degree field of view, as well as 3D depth and spatial audio, and it's at 8K resolution. And the reason that we're talking about it this week is that Apple has released two pieces of content around it. So the first is what Ian was talking about. It's 4 minutes inside the Super Bowl, which Ian will tell you all about, because once again, I don't know anything about American football. And the other is a new series called Elevated, the first episode of which lets you soar over simmering volcanoes, rushing waterfalls, and breathtaking ocean cliffs of Hawaii. And for some reason, I cannot get I can now get some of the images to load here for this new Elevated series that, by the name, obviously has you on an aerial tour of some of the most scenic locations on planet Earth.
So I love this comment. Just to call it out here, I loved trying the Vision Pro for 12 days, and now I'm in the market to find a good, like new, discounted one. Very, very interesting. I noticed people have been in our comments or asking in various corners, what's the going rate for a sold Vision of a used Vision Pro these days? Because there are people curious on both sides. Like most people asking that question want to dunk on the fact that like it's gone down in value, but I think that those are also legitimate questions from real people wondering, maybe I can try the future out for maybe $1,000 or $2,000 less than the upfront cost.
Yeah, the one thing I would note about buying a used Vision Pro is that the light seal you're going to get is going to be not ideal for your face, right? Apple sells something like 20 different light seal sizes, as well as three different strap sizes. And so that's based around a face scan that they will either do in the store or you can do remotely using your iPhone. So you might end up needing to spend another couple of $100s on top of that used headset to get that for your face, or you're going to have an uncomfortable experience. So I've seen Vision Pro seems to be going for around $2,500 on the used market, but keep in mind you may need to add another $100 $300 or so on top of that.
Yeah. And there was something here. Okay, so I want to talk about again this ecosystem wide, decades long journey. So if we go back to, I think it was 2018 or 2019, Meta had one of its Connect events, and they had arena scale VR set up on Quest headsets. So I think it was 3v3, so six Quest headsets before the headsets were even really on the market available for consumers. All in an arena together. They had, six people in an arena together, all playing a game right around the corner from that demo, right around the corner from this arena scale future facing VR thing. They had 360-degree cameras set up. They had this like a monument. I remember it was set up around the corner. And then at earlier events, even before then, Meta Connect events going back into the mid 2010s, they had these 360-degree cameras set up from startups. Jaunt was one of the big ones that was out there for a while. These cameras, I remember laughing with one of these executives as he explained how one of these tens of thousands of dollar cameras was strapped to a supercar and then flew off the supercar in the middle of one of their races and just, a bunch of shattering glass getting thrown across the race course. It this this has been a market that's been around for a decade and more. Stereoscopic videos. Even you go into the Apple video library, you can find The Wizard of Oz presented in stereoscopic format on on headsets, right? Like there's 3D stereoscopic movies are a very, very old idea that is just now becoming good enough to actually share and capture in a meaningful way. Even Hollywood directors, James Cameron, maker of Avatar, he goes and invests tons and tons of money, time, decades of research to make a movie in 3D, Avatar. And what happens? A bunch of people go and see it on poor projected theaters that make them feel a little ill because the brightness isn't good enough and the projection systems aren't great enough to present his vision the way he intended. That's the history of 3D media. The world's best directors, biggest money making directors, held back by the technology of delivery. And here we are with VR headsets.
Sure, yeah, and that's even just the spatial video we're talking about, and but we're talking about immersive video, which is a completely different ballgame, right? Because we're now not even talking about a rectangle; we're talking about the front 180 degree of your view. And as you say, this is something that traditionally has cost tens of thousands of dollars, on the order of $100,000 to do this in a really compelling way with 3D at this quality. And that Black Magic camera that Apple was talking about, that we were talking about, that is going to be a cost reduction, and we expect that thing to be somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000, right? This camera on the left, and that is going to be major in itself. Now, as we've talked about on this show, you can do 2D 180-degree capture for a lot lower cost than that. We talked about an innovative product a few months ago that does it for $500 and that you can hold in your hand. But even they have said, the idea of taking this from 2D to 3D is like just a completely different realm of difficulty and cost that company is not even going to tackle yet. And that wouldn't be at 8K either, right? So I think that was 4K. So trying to get to this level, it is going to be for the foreseeable future that this is in the realm of film studios and professional videographers, not something that regular people can capture. But Apple has been teasing this massive library of immersive content that they have coming up. We've talked about two of them coming today. For example, that Super Bowl video that you said your family member was blown away by, and I have had this same experience. Right, people who I have actually showed 180 degree and 3D and 360 degree 3D videos in the past on older headsets who didn't quite feel that the quality level was there. Right, they were like, "This is a bit too blurry. It's not good." When I put them in Apple immersive video, they were blown away. It demos better than some of the photorealistic VR content, like rendered content, because it just looks so good. And I've said before, one of the reasons is just that it's 8K and 3D, right? We're not talking about those old 4K or 3K or 2K videos. But the other reason is bitrate. Apple has invested in streaming these things at a very high bit rate. So you're not seeing that blockiness that you may be used to in older 180-degree immersive video. Afro Badgers just pointed out in the comments that Meta has funded some 180-degree immersive shows. The issue is quality. Apple has realized that, and it was so obvious to anyone that used them. The issue wasn't the format; it was the quality. Stop streaming these things at low bit rate to save a couple of cents on your server costs. They're going to look like a blocky mess. To be fair to Apple, they are providing this all through the Apple TV Plus subscription, right? So, this is not a free service for them. They are taking your money and in exchange giving you something high quality, and they are padding this out over time. We see on this highlight thing that they have all these different series that bring you to wildlife, to some of the most scenic parts of the world. There's going to be a music video from The Weeknd, an extreme sports thing from Red Bull, a documentary on the military, Arctic surfing, hot air balloons. We obviously see Prehistoric Planet, an immersive version of that David Attenborough documentary on Apple TV Plus. And most significantly, we're going to see a short film, Submerged, which is from the director of, I think it's All Quiet on the Western Front is the name of the film. If you've heard of that or seen that, the same director is making the first ever kind of short film out of this. And I really strongly think that what we'll talk about our next topic very soon, which is directly relevant. Once you get cheaper Apple Vision headsets that people can actually afford, this content is a system seller. This is going to be one of the types of use cases that sells Apple Vision headsets.
Yeah, and that was kind of the reason I pointed out that backstory there of Meta already exploring this space, and our commenters reinforcing that Meta has already funded a lot of exploratory work and shuttered that exploratory work. And here is what we've seen out of Apple is we had this company called NextVR. I followed them from 2015 onward. Went to some of their earliest demos, and from the very first moments I put on one of their streams in my headset, I could see the difference in quality of just everything they had done to make this a great experience. Well, that company, NextVR, tried to do it on their own. They had partnerships with the NBA to stream NBA games live as they happened in this incredible format, but they couldn't get funded through the pandemic and with enough money to see them through into the future. And so 2020 came around, 2019, 2020, they ran out of money and then sold off the pieces of the company to Apple. Well, Apple really did take the pieces of what they had done and package it together into this product line where Meta just let this entire area go away. They said, we're not interested. We're going to let someone else do this. And now they're going to have to bring that back into the Meta ecosystem at a high quality. And how much money is that going to cost them now? And how is the quality ever going to match what Apple is going to pull out here in the next little bit?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. The problem is that Meta misdiagnosed the problem. They thought that this kind of content wasn't compelling. It's something, a trend we've been talking about here. The problem was, Meta, you didn't do it at high enough of a quality. There are content types that are great, but only past a certain quality threshold. And if you throw all of this content money at it, but you're below that content threshold and you're delivering on this cheap $3 Oculus Go headset or Samsung Gear VR junk that overheats your phone and drains your battery in 5 minutes, nobody's going to want to use it. But when you actually invest to create high quality experiences that people find to pass that quality threshold, it matters. And as you're bringing up, Ian, sports, and I think that's in the far future going to be where this becomes massively compelling. Right now we're seeing this 4-minute highlight reel of the Super Bowl. We saw maybe what was it, a 7-minute or something like that MLS highlights reel as well, and Major League Soccer. Once they can figure out how to stream this live, and in every major sports game you have these cameras sitting there on the court side, that becomes a massive system seller. Now, to be fair to Meta, they're doing this with the NBA, but not in 3D, in 2D. Again, it's this thing where you got the right idea, but you're missing that little quality mark there. 3D, that really does change the perspective, because you don't feel like you're, in some sort of sphere that has the image projected on it. You do get a sense that you're actually there. And yeah, it's something that you can absolutely imagine. As soon as they can stream major sports games through this live, which is no small feat, there are going to be a lot of technology investments needed there. Vision headsets start flying off the shelf once they obviously have an affordable one, which is our next topic.
Yeah, so very interesting way of outlining things, and it's a hard area to get right. But think about the way Meta does A/B tests. They data gather everywhere, right? Everything we've described, all the things people hate about the Meta ecosystem, where like you see a feature pop up and then it disappears, or it comes back 6 months later, or it's not explained. It's usually like an A/B test, or it's Meta restructuring itself. Well, here what we have is Apple testing the waters for the right format and the right way to deliver all of this content on their system. And what David's saying is 100% accurate. It's nailing exactly what's going on here. Think about the variety of sporting events out there in the world. You've got drone races, water races, sporting events where you've got 30 people running around a single field, all with unique movements in real time, throwing a small, fast-moving object or back and forth, and you've got a global audience of people who like they're placing bets. Uh, the lives will be changed based on the outcome of whether that pass actually makes it to the other person at the other end. That's how important it is that the broadcast gets out there as quickly as possible. What was it? The 1960s movies, The Sting, where they like figured out a way to delay the relay of information across the globe so you could place a bet, even though the bets had already been closed. Like, that's how important it is you get live gaming information to an audience as quick as humanly possible. And people in our audience are like, I won't pay a lot of money for this. At the same time, think about the real billion-dollar markets that exist for NFL Sunday packages, MLB at bat, all the billions of dollars that exchange hands to black you out of being able to watch your favorite sporting event unless you've paid for the service provider that has paid for the rights to show you your favorite sporting event in VR. And you can go down the list: football, basketball, soccer, and all of the other sports on Earth. There are rights to be acquired to stream those things in VR. And then you've got in this format is just the beginning, right? You can imagine having 3D objects of the maps of the space right in front of you. Those ideas are being explored right now. I think F1 racer or racing is being explored in that route where you've got a map showing you the course of racers going around, as well as this type of format. The issue I remember was NextVR once streamed. I think it was NextVR. Could be Jaunt. I could be mixing them up. But one of them had a presidential debate. They had gone through the effort of putting a 180-degree or 360-degree camera up on the stage with either the vice presidential candidates or the presidential candidates, and you could put on a VR headset and be where the camera was on that stage. The problem was they didn't give the camera the same placement that all the broadcast cameras got. Or even if they did get the same placement, it was too far away. And so you're standing there and the candidate's over on that side of the room, and it's still a blurry mess because of the camera placement. You need camera placements to capture moments of sports that you could not enjoy any other way. You need a camera up on the backboard with unobstructed views, and it can't shake
Yeah.
when they come and dunk the ball into the hoop. And if you get that angle, you get maybe 5 shots per NBA game that show you this incredible dunk happening right in front of the camera. But it's only for those 5 moments that this camera system is going to work to take you there. The camera systems that take you to major sporting events are so sophisticated. It's incredible. The way these zipline cameras go across you're going to get a great experience on a normal television for the foreseeable future out of whatever sporting event you want. But each year going forward, each sporting event going forward, Apple's going to get data on where to put the cameras for this specific sporting event, how much they need to pay to get the rights to stream that event in the near future, and all of that is going to pay off handsomely in the very near future.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I would say is the importance of having multiple immersive cameras placed around the stadium is more significant the lower resolution you have, right? Because if you imagine yourself being physically at a stadium with your own human eye's ability to discern, 60 pixels per degree or beyond, no matter where you're sitting, it's better than watching it on TV, right? It depends on your viewpoint, but I think I'd much rather be there than be watching it on TV. So theoretically, if you had a much, much higher resolution, you wouldn't need that. But for the foreseeable future, yeah, the ability to teleport, it's something Meta does have in their NBA streaming that you get on Quest, right? So I said it before, again, it's not 3D. It's still cool, though. You should try it out if you're in the US, that there are some NBA games streamed on Quest, and you can actually teleport to exactly what you said. Exactly what you just said is what you can teleport behind the hoop to watch that and see that. And so let's move on to our next topic, and I'm going to do that by segueing, by reading out a comment from our viewer, if I can find it. Let me see if I can find this comment.
I want to mention the Super Bowl halftime show theory, and just as a last example here, there's been no mention from Apple about doing Apple Immersive Video as the halftime show, but the halftime show is this perfect example. So Usher did the halftime show this year, and who's doing it next year? I can't think of their name offhand. But there's going to be this big halftime show, and it's this perfect moment where Apple could put the cameras exactly where they need to capture the entire event directly in front of the performers. And this is the thing that will sell these headsets over time that you can't really grasp until you go in there. That the angles that those cameras can take you are better than a seat in the house. They're better than actually going to the stadium. And even if you spent 15 or 20 grand for 4 seats in the best 50-yard line seat, it still wouldn't get you as close as a camera planted 3 feet directly in front of the performer as they're doing the halftime show, or in the case of the Super Bowl video, directly on the field itself. So you can actually go on to the field. And that's like when the camera crew takes you down onto the field, it doesn't have the same effect as actually standing there embodied with Apple Immersive Video.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if your thoughts here are inspired by the Alicia Keys rehearsal room video, which if you have a Vision Pro, you should definitely try out because it's exactly as it sounds. You're in a rehearsal session with this artist, and it is not even remotely comparable to just watching a TV show video of them, a 2D video. It's not the same thing. I have had so many people that I've demoed Vision Pro to say, like, it's almost strange how much it feels like you're in the room with this artist. You almost feel like you're invading their privacy because you're there and they're not really acknowledging your existence. It's like you feel like you're there, and it's the magic of VR at the end of the day, right? That's the fundamental pitch that's been in VR since consumer VR was revived over a decade ago. You feel like you're in another place. And with Apple Immersive Video, for the first time, I think in Immersive Video, I really feel like I'm in another place that is real, not a virtual rendered view. And the market potential here is absolutely enormous over time.
Yeah, so another example there, what was it, Gear VR? What was the name of the very first Gear VR demo experience that was in a loft? You had a very intimate rehearsal performance in a loft on the Gear VR back in the day, and it was one of the very first things you did when you put on that headset and experienced it. And it felt personal. Everything you just described about this experience right here from Alicia Keys was there on day one from the Meta Facebook ecosystem. Felix and Paul did some incredible performances. Have you ever seen the Felix and Paul? Uh, what's the name of Cirque du Soleil? So they did incredible captures of Cirque du Soleil performances, and one of the best Cirque du Soleil performances you'll see from Felix and Paul, they perform for the camera. The performers all address you as if you're the center of their world. It was an incredible experience, and there should have been, it could have been an entire business inside Meta, and it just didn't get the support. And it's the same thing you're seeing here.
Yeah, Felix and Paul is the closest thing to Apple Immersive Video. The problem is that to get them at this quality, you had to download them, right? You actually had to pre-download them. And one of the most terrible experiences in the world is sitting in a VR headset waiting for something to download. It's the same as waiting for an app to compile shaders. You're sitting there in darkness waiting for something to download. It's terrible. Apple Immersive Video can't even be downloaded. It's streamed only. You press start and it plays. It just works. That's the problem. With Felix and Paul, you could stream them off, used to be called Oculus TV. It's now called MetaQuest TV. But for some reason, Meta, Facebook, whatever they were called back then, decided to do it at a horrible bit rate so that you got these brilliantly captured things that if you downloaded, you could see were very high quality, streamed at a bad bit rate. So the Apple Immersive Video, the magic here is that you get streaming and high bit rate in one thing. And some people in the comments are talking about 3D video and, why it failed. And then I obviously talked about why flat 180 degree video doesn't feel great. These things on their own are okay, right? A 3D TV, it's all right. It's not good enough I never thought it would be good enough to be a mass market product, and it failed. Yeah, okay. 180 degree video with Gear VR and Go, yeah, it's not really good. But when you put these things together, 180 degree and 3D with high bit rate and streaming instant, it's all of those things put together, and 8K, should I add. Without any of these parts, the experience doesn't pass that quality threshold. But with all of these parts together, it works. And I see Mr. Mycelium has ended my sentence in a horrible quote in the comments there. How dare you? Finish the sentence, please. That's not what I said.
All right. It's time for us to move on. I think we are going to be a mega episode here as we move towards the back half of the show. I want to say thank you to all of our commenters who have been watching with us this far. We are at an hour and 42 minutes into this episode. I think we definitely are getting to see a lot of people keeping us on in the background as they are exploring VR. It feels great to be on those journeys with you. It feels great to see so many regular viewers coming in week after week, talking on this journey through us, understanding that we're all trying to figure this out together, kind of what the use cases are going to be that are going to bring in the next tens of millions of people into VR. What is our next subject, David?
Sure. So when we cover anything to do with Apple Vision Pro content or Vision OS, the number one feedback we get from commenting on social media is not worth $4,000, not worth $3,500. Sigh, don't care, not worth $4,000. And I see that in some of our comments here, even a couple of comments, saying none of this really matters given that this thing is so expensive that so few people own it. And you know what? You're right. $3,500 is a ridiculous price. This thing is unaffordable for the vast majority of people, and that's crazy. But that's why the next topic matters. What we have seen from a variety of reports over the past 2 years, now from a great number of sources, is that Apple's next move is to make a cheaper and lighter Vision headset. So not only was the price the biggest complaint with Vision Pro, but also the weight. And reportedly, Apple's focus for a headset that they hope to bring out by Christmas of next year, not this year, but Christmas of next year, is a lighter and much cheaper Vision headset. Now, we don't know how much cheaper this Vision headset will be, but the number one thing that makes Vision Pro expensive is its micro OLED displays. So it has these very expensive near 4K micro OLED displays from Sony. and they have a pixel density of over 3,000 pixels per inch, which is absolutely insane if you know anything about displays. I think probably the most pixel dense displays shipped in a consumer product ever. In fact, I don't think it is the most pixel dense display shipped in a consumer product ever. But because of the difficulty of manufacturing those, Sony can't make many of them. They don't want to invest in this low yield process that is going to scale up production. So for over a year now, Apple has reportedly been talking to Chinese display manufacturers, BOE and Sia, to try and get cheaper micro OLED displays to bring down the cost of future vision headsets. And it seems likely that one of those cheaper micro OLED displays may be used in next year's vision headset. But how do you get even cheaper than that? Because let's say Apple does that and they can come out with a Vision Air next year. I've just made up that name to be clear, that's not official. That's $2,000 or $2,500 or even $1,800, right? That kind of $1,800 to $2,500 range. It's cheaper than Vision Pro. It opens up the market to a bunch more people, sure. But how do they get down to the prices that really matter? The $800 to $1,200 range, where they sell MacBook Airs and iPad Pros and iPhone. Why do they get to that range? So we have a report this week from a South Korean news outlet that said that JDI, a massive display maker in Japan, has pitched a regular OLED panel to Apple with a pixel density of 1,500 pixels per inch. So this would be the most pixel dense regular OLED display ever made, to the point where it almost approaches the pixel density range of micro OLED displays. And regular OLED has the advantage of being a lot easier and cheaper to manufacture than micro OLED. So this panel could give the same advantages of, infinite contrast and deep blacks and punchy colors that micro OLED gives, but at a much lower cost. And that is what could allow Apple to get down to that $1,000 or so range. Now, according to this report, these panels would not be in mass production until 2 or 3 years from now. They could also come from Samsung, so other OLED makers, maybe even LG, will be able to make these very high-density regular OLED displays. And so we don't expect that to be in the next headset, but this could be how they go even further in the later half of the decade. Because we expect this not to be some magic moment where you suddenly get a cheap headset, but we expect this to be a gradual process where you go from the $3,500 of today's Vision Pro down into the 2,000s, into the high 1,000s, and then down to that price range. So the reason that this matters, we talk so often about Vision OS because Vision OS is the product. Vision Pro is just in some ways an expensive dev kit, in other ways, an enthusiast, prosumer, wealthy early adopter product. But all of these headsets that come in the future, they're going to run the same Vision OS. They're going to have all the same App Store content. They're going to have, that Apple immersive video content we've talked about, and, all those live streaming sports things that might happen down the line, but on cheaper and cheaper hardware over time. And so this report is very, very interesting. Now, to get a decent resolution at that pixel density, Apple would probably have to make a slightly bulkier headset, right? It may even be bulkier than the current Vision Pro, but they should also be able to make it lighter if they use lighter materials instead of freaking glass and aluminium. And if they get rid of things like the iSight front display and they use, a lighter cooling architecture with A series chips instead of M series chips, there's a lot of paths for Apple to take here, but the idea is that they are very much so. There were reports that indicated that Apple considered micro OLED to be the minimum standard for VR, right? That they did not want to ship a headset that didn't have micro OLED. Well, it looks like they may be considering, again, this report is just about a display manufacturer sending them a sample and Apple investigating it, that they may be considering, well, what if we do keep OLED? We're not going to go and do what Meta does and put LCD headsets out there that give you this horrible contrast and murky grays, but maybe we'll use very, very high density regular OLED and see if we can make a cheap headset out of that one day. The big disadvantage of regular OLED, as anyone will know with a PlayStation VR 2, is that there is typically this mirror effect, this inconsistency in brightness that comes across as like a fixed pattern noise. And that's the big open question here. Can JDI solve that? If they can solve that and get a consistency of brightness and image, then sure, you can start using regular OLED for the headsets like this. If they can't, Apple is not going to accept it. Apple will not ship a headset with the Mura that PSVR 2 has. So that is going to be the big roadblocker here, I think, if it does become an issue.
A lot of people in our comments are calling out the headsets of yesteryear that were based on OLED designs, right? You had PSVR 1, Quest 1, both OLED designs with true blacks as the basis for VR. And then you had these platforms kind of roll back from those offerings in the future. And it's significant. This is an audience that knows what it means to have an actual darkness in VR. One of my favorite demos I think I've seen of what Apple Vision Pro is capable of and how the whole pipeline works is if you pull up the What If experience, the Marvel's What If experience, and then cast it to a TV so that you've got the opening scene, which is a star field. The opening scene has a star field, and you've got a whole bunch of stars up in the distance. And in VR, it feels like a real star field. It feels like you're actually looking at the inky black night. But on the display, the casting mirror here, what you're seeing as a viewer, anyone else in the room, is the foveated view into the headset. So you're only seeing what the headset is actually rendering. Well, it's really, really interesting when they do it this way because uh, if you look at the screen, you only see stars where the eye is pointed at any given moment. When the eye points away and looks in a different direction, that area that isn't being pointed at with the eyes turns to blackness. It turns to darkness of night because they don't need to render. Apple's headset doesn't need to render those little bit of stars anymore because the headset, you and the headset aren't pointing your eyes at the stars over there anymore. It's a weird, silly little thing that you'd only, like a technical viewer would only ever notice, but it is illustrative of the fact that Apple has chosen true black as the basis for all of their artists. Anyone who comes to an Apple headset can provide real darkness to their users, and that's not a sacrifice you have to make as a developer. Meta has clearly looked at the ecosystem for Horizon OS headsets and said, not everyone needs to have real darkness.
Yeah, I mean, you do just lose so much with LCD. Now, you have to make the counter argument that we wouldn't have $300 Quest 2s and soon $300 Quest 3S headsets and $500 Quest 3s without LCD, right? LCD is cheaper and easier to manufacture, but you do lose so much. And it's not just that you get these true blacks on OLED. It's actually that on LCD, below a certain darkness level, below a certain brightness level, I should say, you just lose all the detail altogether, right? It crushes all low brightness detail, all detail in dark areas into nothingness, into just this murky gray haze. And so in dark experiences, where, set in nighttime scenes, you can see this. Like I've used OLED headsets and I've used LCD. There are entire areas where I see details in an OLED headset where I go in an LCD headset in that same experience and I see nothing. I just see this murky gray block. And that's a loss to the kind of things you can make, right? There's this great cyberpunk style game on Quest standalone that we recently reported on. And they've done a huge amount of effort to get something that looks acceptable on a standalone headset there. But the limitation to the image quality there isn't the chipset anymore. The actual overall biggest limitation there is just that that's on an LCD. And when I was recently testing PlayStation VR 2 on PC, that was one of the things I was just blown away by because I've been using LCD headsets on PC for so long that I just forgot how much detail there is in some of these games, like Elite Dangerous, that you just like Aircar, even that Aircar demo that's on Steam VR, that is just a great demo of this like generic Unreal Engine city that you travel around in this little kind of Blade Runner style car. It's just incredible how much is lost. And I talked about this with PSVR 2 when I talked about its PC review, where it's so frustrating because you do have that mirror issue, which then kind of negates a lot of these advantages in certain situations. But overall, I can absolutely see why Apple is considering OLED as this minimum quality. And I would strongly wager that we will never see Apple ship an LCD Vision headset.
Yeah, I think of darkness. I think of going to sleep in your headset, laying in bed and relaxing, turning on the blue light mode, the blue light killing mode in these headsets, right? If you have, again, black OLED as your basis, I think you're going to get a more relaxing experience even out of that. But that's just my hypothesis there. But I think we're ready to move on here pretty
Yeah,
soon to the last section of this show.
sure. The last thing I want to point out is LL's comment, who kind of balances this by saying that, I'm comparing this to LCDs with the traditional backlight. And if you have a lot of dimming zones, you have a lot of mini LED backlights behind an LCD, it can actually look quite good. The problem is that you're always still going to have that blooming issue. And sure, it is a good balance, right? If Quest 4 comes out with, mini LED backlight, maybe it could happen, right? Then Meta can get a lot of the way there. But there's still, walk into a store that sells televisions, I think Best Buy in the US or Curry's in the UK, and look at the best mini LED backlight LCD TV beside the best OLED TV, and you can instantly tell the difference. On OLED, your lighting resolution is the same as your color resolution, right? Every pixel is its own light. On LCD televisions, the resolution of the backlight, even with mini LED, is still orders of magnitude below, right? You might have 8 million color pixels and then 5,000 at most lighting pixels. So think about the vast difference. You have 5,000 lights behind 8,000 color pixels. And that's with OLED, you have 8 million color pixels and 8 million lights. And it's just such a dramatic difference that self-illuminating display technologies are always going to be the best way. And that it looks like Apple is trying to find a cheaper way to get that. And I'm very interested to see this happen, right? The day that you can walk into an Apple store and buy $1,000 vision headset, we always talk about this, and people will probably mock me for this, of saying, that's the moment when everything takes off. And I've even said in the past, there is no moment. This is a gradual process. But that, in a way, is going to be the moment when everything takes off, right? When you can walk into an Apple store and buy a $1,000 vision headset.
Yeah, the relationship between cost and features is what we chart out on this show, I think, better than anyone else. One thing we do really uniquely well is talk about those pressures and how they're gonna arrive at the same places. Really exciting ideas to think about lower cost visions in our future. A lot of people in our audience kind of imagining that it'll never happen, while at the same time, I think Apple shipping Vision Pro. Remember, they did invite us to the debut of this headset. They did, there's teams and people at Apple who know that they're building a VR headset and a VR based platform at the very core of this offering, and it's only getting started. It's like people look at this $3,500 headset and go, it's the same old Apple. It's the same like too expensive for me market, when you're kind of forgetting that they just spent the last 25 years figuring out how to turn the iPod into an entire product line that can serve people at the very high end and the very low end. And then they went and repeated that entire thing with the iPad and the iPhone. And they're midway through trying to do that with AirPods and Apple Watch, and they're only beginning to kind of offer all of those products for all of those different things. But they will get there with Apple Vision Pro. They will find a way to offer these things at so many different prices.
Yeah, with Apple Vision, as James O'Loughlin pointed out in the comments, and the thing that I think just makes the mainstream media and pessimist coverage of this so obnoxious is just the product is called Vision Pro. What do you, as James O'Loughlin's pointing out, what do you think the Pro's for? Do you think this is because they think this is the cheap headset? Of course, it's the expensive headset. It's called Pro. It's like you come out with the iPhone Pro first, or the MacBook Pro, and go, oh, why is this thing so expensive? But let's sort of finish that rant there when we can, and move on to the last topic, unless there's anything else you want to add to the Apple Vision discussion.
I'm very excited at the 2 hour mark of our show to talk about PlayStation VR 2 and all the reasons I am right for the wrong reasons. So let's get into this, David. What do we have today to talk about PS5?
Sure. So we're at the end going to talk about PS5 Pro. So we're not talking about PC today. We're actually talking about PS5 Pro for our main topic, but we do have a smaller PC topic to talk about first. This is something that is very impressive that they figured this out, and it's that a VR developer of the game Cactus Cowboy Desert Warfare, has figured out how to get the adaptive triggers working on PC. So again, if you've lived under a virtual rock, I'm going to keep using that phrase. Last month, Sony released a PC adapter and Steam VR driver for PlayStation VR 2, so you can use it on PC. But it's missing some of the headset's standout features. As I called it in my review, it's a bare minimum port to PC. It doesn't have high dynamic range, it doesn't have eye tracking, it doesn't have precision controller haptics, and it doesn't have adaptive triggers. If you're unfamiliar with the PlayStation ecosystem, adaptive triggers is this unique feature of the PS5 and PSVR 2 controllers that lets developers dynamically set the resistance of the triggers so that it's actually harder or easier to squeeze them based on the virtual object they're holding in VR or on flat screen. A bunch of different dynamics are possible. But this is a really interesting haptic effect. It's not available in any other VR controller. It really does add a sense of kind of haptic depth and the feeling of holding different objects having a different feel in your hand when you go to squeeze that trigger that no other VR system currently does. And so it's really impressive that this developer got it working on PC. So I tried this out with a beta version of their game. It requires right now a paid piece of software that is also on Steam called DSX. So they're actually working with the developer of this DSX tool, and the game sends the commands to DSX, which sends it to the controller. But the developer tells us that they're working on native code so that the game will just be able to do it without you doing anything. You're not going to have to install any software, do anything. You just load the game and you'll get those adaptive triggers working. And the best part is that they say they're going to make the source code available to any other PC VR developer who wants it. So any PC VR developer, when this code is out there, will be able to add adaptive triggers to their PC VR games when the user is using PlayStation VR 2 Sense controllers.
Yeah, so we've got a question in our comments here asking about the difference between YouTube channel membership and UploadVR website membership. The direct UploadVR.com membership supports our work directly. We get a larger percentage of that money coming to our pool than we get out of the YouTube revenue. We just get a smaller share there. On the website, you get no ads if you sign up for membership. We're also toying with a lot of interesting ideas that we could do with membership, either on the website or on YouTube, but we haven't figured out what those are just yet. The main thing is just supporting the work of independent journalists that we keep us going. That's what you get out of this by supporting us right now, even though we are trying to figure out ways to include more benefits over time. On this subject in particular, I'm gonna have to go where my mind wants to, and that is to imagine the only news that would excite anyone to go buy a PSVR 2 this holiday season, and that would be Half-Life Alyx getting announced for PlayStation itself at the same time that Mark Zuckerberg is announcing his stuff at the Connect event. It's the only thing I can ever imagine changing buyers at this point in time. I'm seeing it in our comments, people that are just really not sold on everything that is being offered by PSVR 2 on PC right now, even though you can get Half-Life Alyx that way right now. There are so many people. I'm seeing people that want Gran Turismo, right? Imagine Gran Turismo combined with all of the other things that Steam provides out of your PS5. I want it, David. I want it, and I will come to you and argue with you until I'm blue in the face saying I want it, and I think it would be the biggest win in the world for Sony and Steam to team up at this moment and say, this is what our system provides that you can't get necessarily out of Meta system. So I just need to mention it and get it out of my system, and then we can move on to the last few subjects here on PS5.
God bless the people playing the UploadVR VR download drinking game.
Yeah,
all right.
we're giving them all. We're giving them all this week, but it's 2 weeks before Connect, and this is the time for the stops to be pulled out of all of the competition. This is the moment that they've all been building for. If you really believe that the metaverse is the future, or if you believe that VR headsets are the foundation of personal computing, we're going into 2025 here. We're going decades on from the computer revolution, decades on from the cellular phone revolution. And are we really going to be using keyboard and mouse in the 2030s as our primary mode of input? I don't think so. And we're going to be doing a transition here that requires out of the box thinking, out of the box agreements and partnerships. And David, I gotta. It was a big. Do you remember the day when Valve formally announced it had the Steam Link app on Quest? That was an unexpected reveal. Do we not think any more unexpected reveals like that could happen?
So it was unexpected, but it makes sense for Valve because again, they get the money from the games you're buying, right? They're making it easier to connect to their store. And the unexpected part wasn't that Valve would do it; it's that Meta would allow and promote it, right? That's the only unexpected part. But to come back to this, what we're seeing here, I expect that we will actually see probably over the next year, through the ingenuity of PC developers of all kinds, be it game developers like this or people like Ivory that have been working on drivers, probably the majority of PlayStation VR 2's standout features come across the PC. I think we'll see eye tracking for sure happen in the next year. High dynamic range may be a little bit more difficult because you're going to need to probably play with the headset's firmware for that. Headset rumble, this developer is already working on. Okay, so this developer that's got adaptive triggers working, they're already working on headset rumble and they think they can get that done. And then precision controller haptics should be possible too, right? Because again, it just shows you what a lazy port PSVR 2 to PC was. You don't even get the precision haptics that Steam VR supports. It's just a basic rumble. So I think we'll get all of those advanced haptic features, the adaptive triggers, the headset rumble, and the controller precision haptics. Eye tracking is less certain, but probably. And then HDR, I think, is going to be the hardest of all. High dynamic range is going to be hard. If they get that, I'll be very, very impressed. But yeah, let's talk about our final topic now, which is PlayStation 5 Pro and what it might mean for PlayStation VR 2 and what it definitely will mean for PSVR 2. So I'm firstly going to start by just giving my opinion on the PS5 Pro, and I'm going to make some enemies here, I'm sure. But you know that you watch this show not for us to tell you what you want to hear or us to sit and say nothing and give you meaningless platitudes. You watch this show because we give you our real takes. I think people are thinking I'm going to go the opposite direction than I'm going to go here. I'm actually going to defend this thing and say that people have been reacting as if this was the PlayStation 6 that was announced. You get kind of this one view of, some journalists trying to make this into a pattern of, oh, is this a test for the priciness of next generation consoles? And then you get another view, on the other hand, which is, who cares about hardware? The hardware is good enough. Why aren't they talking about games? So the second one is easy to counter because they're announcing a piece of hardware, right? This is the Pro model of a piece of hardware. It's the Pro model of a console. Of course, they're going to talk about how it makes existing games look better and play better because that's the whole point of the console, right? For the first one, this is a Pro model, right? This isn't replacing the PS5. Sony did not announce a price hike for the PS5. This is a higher end option. And on the flat screen realm, the pitch here is really simple. I think their video was kind of badly done. I will give you all that, right? Their pitch was bad, but it is a simple pitch. Today on PS5 on flat screen, you have to choose between quality and performance. It's a really simple pitch. With PS5 Pro, you get performance frame rate at quality. Quality graphics, performance frame rate. $700 is a little bit steep, yes, but given it's not insane, right? Like, given how long people typically have these things for now, you're talking 4, 5, 6, 7, even 10 years that you have this thing for, compare it to the other consumer electronics in your life. Compare it to, it's the same price as an iPad Air, not even an iPad Pro, just an iPad Air. It's it's less expensive than the cheapest iPhone. And I understand, sorry, yeah, the cheapest mainline iPhone. And I understand that an iPhone is an omni tool that's used for a lot more than gaming. I get that. But the craziest part for me is when PC gamers try to call this thing too expensive. And I am a PC gamer, to be clear. But like, can we be real here? Our graphics cards cost more than this thing. You couldn't get like a graphics card you would want to own for $700 these days, never mind an entire system with a 2 terabyte SSD. But I think, again, we're going to just talk about flat screen for now and then we'll move on. The biggest thing that people aren't taking into account with this is PSSR. The ability to have neural upscaling tech, like we see with DLSS on PC, on console is greatly significant. And I expect that that's going to be really underappreciated. And if you think I'm some sort of complete outlier here, you can go and look at Digital Foundry's analysis of this, where they say a lot of the same things I'm saying right now, that people are underestimating the potential of PSSR here. And then, so Ian, why don't you give your views on this for a flat screen console, and then we can talk about VR.
Yeah, very interesting context there. So my PS5 is in my kids' room. It's away from me, and I occasionally get notifications from it telling me about all the fun that PS5 is having with my kid instead of with me. And so I'm in the market for this PS5 Pro. Like it's honestly checks off a lot of the boxes. The idea that I could go and get this system, and then you can connect the disk drive to it externally, right? The disk drive for the other edition works for this edition. Is that right?
Yeah, people have been criticizing that, and that's a fair, that you think for 700 this should come with it, but you can add it on if you want. Yes.
Yeah, so you imagine that getting tacked on, and then you've got 4K 1080, 4K Blu-ray discs playable on the console that's next to your media center. And I'm seeing in our comments, right, when I first hooked up the PS5 and I was going through those AAA games, the games that they really funded and gave the time to build for the PS5 system, they're amazing. They're beautiful. It's wonderful to just take in the splendor of those graphics and just be there in those spaces on this console for a while. It's fantastic. And so the idea that they could take that a little bit further with PS5 Pro is great. Like I love that idea. And then the idea that you can tack on the disk drive, which I got left in the cold on because I bought the launch system that was disk driveless. I was trying to shave off money off of that original purchase. Now I can circle back and get a PS5 Pro with a disk drive and then plug in the PSVR 2 if I really wanted to. But going back to like my experiments last night, I just spent a lot of time to bring my PS4 and its Blu-ray drive into my Quest VR headset. How much more amazing would it be if I could repeat that same process for a PS5 Pro, bring in even in a higher resolution movie into my headset? I would love that in a PlayStation VR 2, but there's still more work to be done here. But I've been a big fan of Sony consoles for a very, very, very long time, and this one checks off a lot of the boxes. Like I don't really buy into the pricing complaints. You get a disk drive, you get
Well, you don't get the disk drive. You have to add it on.
Yeah, no, you go and add the disk drive, and then you've got 4K classic media. You've got all the, I assume that runs DVDs and classic Blu-rays as well. So you've got all of your classic media with you, following you into the future. Then you've got this, high-powered console at the core of all of your gaming, and that's a really nice combination to me.
Yeah. So some of the comments here are complaining, that without patches, this isn't going to do anything for PS5 games. But according to the interview that Sony gave with CNET, that's not correct. The PSSR, their DLSS equivalent, the neural upscaling, is apparently going to work with all games, right? That's actually not something developers need to integrate. According to that interview, that's something that can just be applied across the board. And there's another comment here from Quentin saying that the difference between this and the PS4 Pro is that the leap in performance for the PS4 Pro was much higher for considerably less. So in raw GPU performance, yes, this thing is 45% more powerful than the original PS5. But that doesn't take into account PSSR, right? When you take into account PSSR, if you've used DLSS on PC, you know how incredible it can be, right? You're running games at 1440p and then it's getting upscaled to 4K in a way that looks way better than traditional upscaling techniques. Now, we'll obviously need to wait for reviews of the PSSR's implementation, but from what we understand, there are dedicated extra cores on this specifically for this neural upsampling. And they also say that ray tracing will be 2 to 3 times faster. So again, we're still talking about flat screen for now, but there will be games that didn't have ray tracing that get ray tracing, and you'll be able to play games at 60 FPS with the quality mode quality, because if you take into account that the PSSR, you're going to get an equivalent of roughly the same leap from PS4 to PS4 Pro. But now let's talk about VR, because this is obviously UploadVR. This is VR download. And we're going to talk about how this affects VR. So the main problem for me with PlayStation VR on its most graphically impressive games is reprojection. So if you play something like Horizon Call of the Mountain, it is running at 60 frames per second and being reprojected to 120. And I don't think Sony's reprojection is good. You get this double imaging ghosting effect, and it's not just the display persistence, it's really the reprojection itself. And it doesn't feel great. And the input lag is bad because your controllers are only really working at 60 frames per second. Tracking is only really being properly sampled. The other frames are synthetic. And I don't think 60 to 120 works very well. It just doesn't with Sony's algorithm. So the potential here is that VR developers could release patches for their 60 FPS PSVR 2 games that bring it up to native 90. Because if you run at 90 frames per second mode on PSVR 2, it will be to native 90 hertz, and it feels so much better. There are developers that used reprojection in their initial build. They got so much bad feedback from their players that they reduced the graphics and went to 90 because that's better overall. But with PS5 Pro, you can get both, right? Those games that run at 60 on the PS5 could run at 90 on PS5 Pro. So out of the box, without even talking about PSSR, or as LL says, we should pronounce pisser, as other people are pronouncing, without even talking about PSSR, you may get rid of PSVR 2's biggest issue for me on a rendering level, which is reprojection. Great. Now let's talk about PSSR. So the bad news is that PSSR will not support virtual reality at launch. So PS5 Pro will not be able to neural upscale PSVR 2 games at launch. The good news is that according to that same interview with CNET that I was referencing earlier, Sony confirmed that PSVR 2 will be supported by PSSR in a future update and work with all VR games. So if that interview is correct, unless there's been some mistranslation, well, it was an English interview, but unless there's been some misunderstanding between the interviewer and CNET, then every VR game on PSVR 2 is going to look better on PS5 Pro when that update arrives in future, because you will get a sharper, higher detail image thanks to neural upscaling. And so there's a big difference. So imagine you combine those two things together. Horizon Call of the Mountain for me looks a bit too low resolution, a bit too soft, a bit too blurry, and reprojects. So I could theoretically, let's say it takes 4 months down the line until PSSR supports VR. I could plug in my PSVR 2 to the PS5 Pro and play that same game without the reprojection and without the blurriness. And I think that is a game changer for PSVR 2 and could make a really big difference.
Yeah. Is that our last subject? Is there anything specific we need to cover as well on
our last topic?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do one last pitch here. Is PS5 Pro is exactly what I want. It has everything I want out of a console. I love the idea that I could drive really great, visually impressive games straight to my display and flat screen, and then also power my VR experiences with it as well. But everything that I'm seeing across the course of the year, David, is this is not the time. I don't think this is the time to play a closed ecosystem console card. I don't think the winds are in favor of closed ecosystems right now, and that's the drumbeat I keep hitting here against you and against our audience, trying to push for this idea that uh, this is this is the best idea for a Steam machine that I've ever seen. I want this to be a Steam machine, and I want it to be a PlayStation machine. I want my two gaming ecosystems to become frenemies, and I want them to live on inside this machine. And if we can do that, it would open up so many things for so many people that it all sounds like dreams right now because we all can't think big enough about it. But you could imagine porting an HDMI signal into your PS5 the same way we're porting an HDMI signal into these Quest headsets. You could start imagining your console as, the system to rule them all. And I would love that out of my Sony system. I would love to have this all direct, all of my discs, all of my virtual media, all of it inside this box.
Well, so there's 2 points there, right? You've made 2 separate points. One is the HDMI thing, and I'd point out that the original Xbox One actually did that, right? That was its pitch, and people didn't want that. I'm not saying that maybe it was a fundamentally flawed idea, but let's go back to what you were really asking about, which I'll respond to for the few viewers we have that aren't collapsed under the desk from how many drinks they've just taken from you saying that you want Steam on the PlayStation. And it's not that we can't dream too big. It's that the business model would have to change, right? That these, even at $700, Sony is probably not making a massive profit here. I'm not saying they're selling this thing at cost or a loss. I'm not saying that. But I don't think they're making like the kind of profits that Apple or that Nvidia are making out of hardware. This is still the model of consoles, which is that Sony makes the money off the 30% cut they get on the PlayStation games that you buy. And so putting Steam on there may sell more hardware, but that doesn't matter because that's not their business model. And so you could imagine a business model shift, but then if you think $700 bad, you're going to get $1,000 for this thing because then they have to get that $300 profit because you're buying games on Steam instead of through them. The company who could make a consoleized PC for your living room is Valve. If you want Steam in your living room on a console, there's no reason Valve couldn't do it. They've made a handheld, right, which is designed to exist within the power and thermal limits that can fit in your hand. But if they wanted to build a Steam Blade or a Steam, whatever the hell you want to call it, a Steam Double Deck or whatever they want to call it, that sits in your living room, they could do it. There's nothing stopping Valve from doing this, and they are the company who do it. It could be very similar hardware, right? Valve gets their chipset from AMD, Sony gets their APU from AMD. Valve could do it, but Sony is not the right company to do it, which is all I would say on that specific topic.
All right. Well, we've invested a lot of who we are. This is the hill that I'm going to die on, apparently. If it doesn't happen, yes, I was wrong all along. If it does happen, we are going to have a very big discussion between you and me and our audience about about this. I'll have to figure out how to take my victory dance in a way that still comes off professionally.
I can see Microsoft doing it one day. I'll put that on the record. But I could, but again, it would be with a different kind of business model. There's one last thing I want to say on the idea of PSSR in general, which is that I think this is going to be very important for VR in all forms in the future. We already see that some PC games support DLSS, although there's obviously a fragmentation issue and an investment issue in general. But I actually think that where we could really see neural upskilling be beneficial is in standalone. And I'm going to put out a kind of prediction right now that Quest 4 could allow for a bigger jump than from Quest 2 to Quest 3. If you combine the new chipset we expect to be there in 2 years, again, Quest 4 is reportedly coming in 2026. We're not talking about anytime soon. If you get a chipset that is twice as powerful, plus eye-tracked foveated rendering, plus neural upscaling, I think you could see a Quest 4 that is actually 3 times more powerful than Quest 3 effectively, or even 4 times.
Quentin, Quentin said, just give us $1.99 with the promise that if Alex comes to PSVR 2, I will donate $1,000. So I will remember that. And now I've got motivation for my dance. I'll do a little dance, waiting for that donation button to come up the day it happens. I like the idea that we've built up enough of a reputation here in this discussion that if it happens, right, like we'll go report the news and we'll put it on uploadvr.com as quickly as we possibly can, right? But there will be plenty of people out there waiting for this discussion, should that ever happen, right? Like waiting for the moment that we appear here in this studio and go, well, David, how the tables have turned. All
Well,
right.
for Alex, I mean, I could see Alex coming. Like, I'm not saying I think it'll happen, but that's not out of the question. It's not out of the question. I'm saying Steam on PS5 is out of the question, but I'm not saying that Alex on PS5 is out of the question.
All right, he fell for my trap. I got him. I got the clip. All right, package it up. Let's put it away in the safe place for later.
Valve
And
put the orange box on PlayStation back in the day, did it not? With Half-Life 2, etc. I thought it did.
I want Steam. I want Steam. All right, that's that's it for our show today. I think we're at like 3 hours now. We're pushing up to almost 3 hours. It's been an amazing discussion with our regular viewers. Quentin, thank you for the discussion. To our members here and to our supporters on uploadvr.com. We'll be back on Tuesday with our Gamescast as we dive into Walkabout Mini Golf. We did talk about Walkabout Mini Golf earlier in the show, but they just came out with the Mars Garden course. There's a tour of that on UploadVR's channel you can check out. And then the open beta is available there for Walkabout Mini Golf if you want to try crossplay from iPhone to I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep doing
Super
it.
commenters, they're going to collapse. Please.
Oh
drink
my
water.
gosh, David
Please
is imagining the poor viewer out there that is taking a drink at each mention. I have to figure out how to slip in mentions of the unnamed golf game without actually saying it so that we can protect our viewers. But it is a big moment for that platform with crossplay rolling out across iPhones over to VR, and we're going to keep covering that on an ongoing basis. Anything else you want to say before we close out today, David? Thank you so much to our audience. We'll see you in the future.
Just want to point out to LL's comment saying that neural upscaling is more important in VR than in traditional media because we're so resolution constrained. And I absolutely agree, LL. I think this is the start of that discussion, and we'll talk about it in future. Neural upscaling will really, really matter for VR. That's a prediction I'm putting on the block right now. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday. We'll see you in the future. Thank you very much for the quality of comments, the quality of discussion. If you didn't think of something in time, or if you're watching this after, please put your comment below. We do read them. We do try to respond. Even if we don't get time, we do always read them. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.